Hello, this is Wendy Mathis, and this is my Module 9 Ethics Case Study. So the summary is a young scholar named David was found in possession of a set of brass knuckles. These were in fact given to him by James. He's a bit of a troubled youth from the south side of the city. James was called into the office for his third tardy of the week when a teacher saw the exchange in the hallway, thought it was suspicious, and sent James to the office, and then David was called down. The assistant principal Inman thought that the resource officer should be present, and then questioned James and David as to what the object was. It was found to be brass knuckles, and due to the fact that the resource officer was present, brass knuckles are a weapon and they are illegal, and due to those two things, the resource officer had to arrest both the boys, even though James admitted that they were his and that he had actually threatened David. Unfortunately, the school's district's zero tolerance policy forced the resource officer's hands and the assistant principal. Both students were taken to jail and charged with a felony. The assistant principal now must file paperwork for both boys to be expelled for 45 days, and under the district's zero tolerance policy, they needed to attend the Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, DAEP. He knew that what the school is like, and James had been there before, whereas David never had gotten into any trouble. He felt that it would not be a good place for David, and he chose to violate policy and tear up the paperwork, expelling David. So some legal issues. Ethical legal issues. No, there wasn't anybody physically harmed by the actions of James, even if David will suffer emotionally. Bringing in and possessing the brass knuckles did violate school policy, and it also constituted a felony offense. So those are the legal ramifications, and both boys would have to face a judge and face the felony charge and see what would happen after with the felony charge. Assistant Principal Inman now faces an official reprimand for not only following the policy, because he felt that it would only harm a boy like David. Even though the director understands Inman's position on the matter, he will still have to follow through with the policy and file the paperwork. If he chooses not to, of course, there will be a reprimand on file for Assistant Principal Inman. The hard truth of the matter, unfortunately, this is an unfortunate case of possessing something that is illegal, whether it is yours or not, and all parties involved having to face the consequences of their actions on both sides of the issue. Specific facts of the case. The school itself is a public junior high serving approximately 900 students. It's urban, south side of the city. The DAEP is described as a hellhole. Main people involved are the two young males, the administration, Vice Principal Inman, a teacher that saw the event, the resource officer that was there when questioned, and the two sets of parents, the mothers. One boy is described as rough and, just trying to make it through, and the other one is considered a good student, plays in the band, and has never been in trouble before. Review of the information. Okay, this is just a quick overview of the information. Now, all parties involved. Will there be damage? Both students' mothers were called. One chose to let her son sit, and the other wanted her son out. There was no damage done to the school property. Only to the boys, as in James would be having another mark on his record, and David will actually have his first mark on his record. The assistant principal choosing not to file the paperwork on David will face his reprimand. he is choosing that the reprimand and mark on his record is the lesser of the two evils, knowing what David would face in the DAEP. What are some options? This is a difficult situation. The punishment definitely does not fit the crime, but you would have to follow policy and write both the boys up. You could choose not to take action, but considering that the school resource officer was sitting in the room, he would still have to do his job, in which both the boys would be arrested. Hopefully, knowing that both boys would go in front of a judge, the judge would just take into account and be lenient in his sentencing. And David could also have told someone about the weapon, even though he was immediately called in to the office right after the teacher saw it happen. He could have walked into the office and said, James just handed me this. I don't know what to do with it, or something along those lines, whereas then he wouldn't have been searched and found with the illegal weapon. What is best, although I do not agree with the all or nothing zero tolerance policy that this junior high has, I would have to follow through with it until there are level changes that would be made. You could argue for a lesser sentence punishment for David, as James confessed, but James confessed to the school resource officer, and if he wasn't there, then what do? You would still have to follow through with the policy, because then it's a breakdown of your effectiveness to deliver punishments in the future. If that gets started, your word is your bond, so what you say, those are your decisions, and you need to follow through with those decisions. If David had come with the brass knuckles in first, then it would just be hanging on James, and David could have probably gone back to class, maybe after a phone call with his mother, especially understanding that he was coerced by James, and James fully admitted that he was coerced. But of course, hindsight is always 20/20, and this could be an example of changing policy or pushing to have policy changed. As far as ethical and legal decision making, the only choice would be, with the information given, was both boys are arrested and written up for the expulsion. Hopefully, like I said before, the judge would be lenient with the information about the coercion, and maybe that is also why, in this situation, David ended up back in school after a week, even though the paperwork wasn't filed. The judge reviewed his case, and maybe there's something else that happened. We don't know all of the facts. My implementation, if I was ever faced with this, hopefully I would know my district's policy on weapons and expulsion, and if there's varying degrees of punishment. I would also question the students very carefully and stress the outcomes of the situation before allowing a search to happen. And if a search was going to happen, parents would be called first, so that I think with a phone call to the parents, there's also that gravity of the situation is then pushed upon the children. There's kind of like, oh, okay, I can't just talk my way out of this. My parents are coming in. Definitely warn, not threaten the students, warn them that there are going to be consequences of their actions, and it's not going to be pretty. I would hope that I would have modeled ethical behavior within my own personal conduct and my relationships with students, kind of one of those do as you see me do examples. If I'm honest and forthcoming with the information when asked, then they can respond honestly and forthcoming also. If I remain consistent in my interactions with my students and upholding all policies, then, I believe that I'm acting ethically and legally, and that all decisions in the future will be made fairly and within the framework established. This assignment was definitely a major eye-opener for me because I never really thought about, I knew there was incidents of weapons in school, but just how educators and administration handle that. Like, it's not just phone calls to the police. It's, you have to take everything into account. If there's a policy in place, you need to follow that policy. And then you definitely need to make sure that you're consistent through all of your decision makings for each situation. You can't play favorites, and this is impacting the children. To be in a position to make such drastic decisions about a student's life is a bit daunting for me, and I feel better prepared for this assignment. I had a very long conversation with my principal about this assignment and social worker in the building. It's just a real major eye-opener. We actually have more Tier 2 students here. They kind of have, they're not in their home high school. We are kind of the alternative school, for lack of a better word. I haven't had any behavioral issues with my students. Getting work done, on the other hand, is a bit of a challenge, but this is definitely an eye-opener for me, whereas I have to remain consistent with all of my students through the two main high schools and then our alternative school. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.